They found him in room 237, cold and still, with no wallet, no phone, and no name. After weeks of investigation, what police discovered would haunt them forever. October 14th, 2018. The Grand Pacific Hotel in Portland, Oregon. A place where travelers came and went like shadows, leaving nothing behind but rumpled sheets and empty coffee cups. Betty Martinez had worked housekeeping there for 28 years. She'd seen it all. Families on vacation, businessmen passing through, lonely souls seeking temporary refuge from the world outside. But nothing had prepared her for what waited behind the door of room 237 that cool autumn morning. The Do Not Disturb sign still hung on the handle. Betty knocked twice. No answer. She checked her watch. 11:45. Checkout was at 11. She knocked again, louder this time. Her voice carried down the empty hallway. "Housekeeping, hello?" Silence. She slid her master key into the lock. The door swung open. Heavy. Curtains blocked the daylight, leaving the room draped in shadows. The air felt thick, still, wrong somehow. Betty stepped inside. Her eyes adjusted slowly. She saw the shape in the bed. A man lying on his back, perfectly centered on the mattress. Arms at his sides. Blanket pulled up to his chest, like he'd arranged himself for a photograph. "Sir?" Her voice trembled. "Sir, checkout was an hour ago." He didn't move. Betty's heart began to race. She stepped closer, closer still, and then she saw his face. Grey. Waxy, the unmistakable stillness of death. She stumbled backward, hand flying to her mouth. The scream came anyway, raw and sharp, echoing through the corridor like a warning bell. The manager called 911 at 11:52. Portland police arrived 6 minutes later. Paramedics confirmed what Betty already knew. The man in room 237 was gone. Had been for hours, maybe 8, maybe 10. His body temperature told the story, his lips could not. Detective Sarah Morrison stood in the doorway, watching the medical examiner's team photograph the scene. She'd been with Portland PD for 20 years, seen hundreds of deaths. Most told simple stories: heart attacks, overdoses, suicides that left notes and grieving families. But something about this one felt different. The man looked peaceful, almost serene. Well-groomed, clean-shaven, grey hair neatly combed. He wore expensive pajamas. Dark blue, pressed. The kind you buy when you care about details. "Any ID?" Morrison asked the officer, searching the room. "Nothing, detective. No wallet, no phone, no keys." Morrison frowned. She walked to the nightstand. Empty. The dresser drawers? Empty. The bathroom counter. A toothbrush, toothpaste, generic brand. Nothing else. "Check his clothes," she said. The officer opened the closet. One dark suit hung on a hanger. White dress shirt, conservative tie. Black leather shoes positioned side by side on the floor, perfectly aligned. He checked every pocket, turned them inside out. Nothing. Not even lint. He lifted the shoes. The officer's face went pale. "Detective, the tags. They're all cut out." Morrison stepped closer. She examined the suit jacket. Where the label should have been, only smooth fabric remained, cut with surgical precision. Same with the shirt, the pants, even the shoes. Someone had removed every identifying mark with careful, deliberate intention. "What about luggage?" The officer pointed to a black rolling suitcase in the corner. Morrison unzipped it. 3 changes of clothes, underwear, socks, all tags removed, all labels gone. She ran her hand along the lining. Nothing hidden. No business cards, no receipts, no clues. Her radio crackled. The front desk clerk was waiting downstairs with the registration information. Robert Wu had worked the front desk for 6 years. He remembered the man checking in. October 12th, 2 days ago? Saturday afternoon. 2:17 p.m. exactly. He wore a baseball cap, Wu said, pulling up the reservation on his computer. Sunglasses, kept his head down, paid cash, $340 for 2 nights. Did he say anything? Morrison asked. Just his name, Robert Johnson, that's it. Very quiet voice. Polite, but distant, you know? Like he didn't want to be remembered. Morrison studied the security footage. The camera angle was terrible. The hotel had been built in 1924, and the security system looked almost as old. The footage showed a figure in dark clothes and a cap approaching the desk, checking in, walking toward the elevator. Head always angled away from the cameras, like he knew exactly where they were. Did he leave the room after checking in? Wu shook his head. Never came back down. Never ordered room service. Never used the phone. It's like he just disappeared into that room. But he hadn't disappeared. He'd gone there to die. If you're finding this story as haunting as we are, hit that like button. And stay with us, because what investigators discovered next would turn this mystery into something far deeper than anyone imagined. The medical examiner's preliminary report arrived 3 days later. Dr. Patricia Chen had performed thousands of autopsies in her career with Oregon State Forensics. She prided herself on finding answers, but this body raised more questions than it solved. Cause of death? Cardiac arrest. Likely natural. No signs of trauma. No defensive wounds. No indication of foul play. The man's heart had simply stopped beating sometime during the night of October 13th. But the details surrounding that simple fact painted a disturbing picture. Morrison sat in Dr. Chen's office reading the report, line by line. The victim was approximately 55 to 60 years old. White male. 5'10", 170 pounds. Good physical condition for his age. Evidence of past surgeries. Hip replacement, possibly 10 to 15 years old. Appendectomy scar, much older. Dental work of exceptional quality. Mixture of techniques suggesting treatment from multiple providers, possibly across different regions or countries. Here's what bothers me, Dr. Chen said, leaning back in her chair. This man had excellent health care at some point in his life. The hip replacement alone would cost tens of thousands of dollars. His teeth show the regular professional cleaning, but we found no medications, no prescriptions, nothing. Maybe he didn't need any, Morrison suggested. At his age, with a replaced hip, most patients take anti-inflammatories at minimum, and if his heart was failing, there should have been signs, pills, a doctor's note, something. Dr. Chen tapped her pen against the desk. It's like he stopped existing as a medical patient years ago. Morrison felt the familiar weight of a case going cold before it even started. What about fingerprints? Sent to FBI database. No match. Social security records. No match. Military databases. Nothing. DNA. Sent to the usual places. Could take weeks. Maybe months. Dr. Chen paused. Detective. In modern America, everyone leaves a digital footprint. Credit cards, social media, traffic cameras. This man erased his completely. The physical description went out to every news station in Oregon, then Washington, then nationwide. White male, mid-50s, grey hair, brown eyes, approximately 5'10", 170. Distinguishing marks: small scar above left eyebrow, slight limp from hip replacement. If you know this man, please contact Portland police. The tips came flooding in, hundreds of them, each one investigated, each one leading nowhere. A construction worker in Boise thought he recognized the face. Wrong man. A woman in Seattle claimed it was her missing brother. DNA didn't match. A pastor in Spokane was certain he'd seen the man at Sunday service 3 weeks ago. The timeline didn't fit. Morrison assembled her team in the conference room. 6 detectives, all working different angles. Missing persons reports from all 50 states. Nothing matched. Cold cases involving unidentified bodies. No connections. Federal databases for fugitives, witnesses in protection programs, intelligence operatives. Every search came back empty. "It's like he never existed," one detective said, frustration thick in his voice. But he had existed. Morrison knew it. You don't reach 55 years old without touching someone's life, without leaving traces, without mattering to somebody. The question was why he'd worked so hard to erase all evidence of that existence. The forensic team went back to room 237. This time they looked deeper, scraped under fingernails, vacuumed every fiber, dusted surfaces most people never touched. And slowly, piece by piece, the ghost began to speak. In the bathroom trash, crumpled beneath tissues and an empty soap wrapper, they found a credit card receipt. Not his. Someone else had used that room weeks ago, and housekeeping had missed it. But underneath that receipt, pressed flat against the plastic bin liner, was another slip of paper. Faded, torn at one corner. A gas station receipt from a Chevron in Boise, Idaho. Dated October 10th, 2 days before he checked into the hotel. $42 in fuel. The shoes told their own story. Forensic analysis revealed volcanic soil embedded in the treads. Specific mineral composition consistent with only one place. Craters of the Moon, National Monument in Idaho. He'd walked there recently, stood on that ancient, hostile landscape where nothing grows and everything feels suspended between earth and sky. They found a third piece of evidence in the jacket lining. Someone had sewn a small pocket into the interior fabric. Hidden. Deliberate. Inside that pocket, a handwritten note on paper so thin it was nearly transparent. Numbers and coordinates written in blue ink. 47-6, 116-2348, 12-1983. Morrison entered the coordinates into her computer. The pin dropped on a residential street in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. A small city nestled against a lake, surrounded by forests and mountains. The kind of place where people knew their neighbors, where families grew roots. December 1983. The date had to mean something. Rental car agencies across the Pacific Northwest were contacted. On October 9th, a Toyota Camry had been rented from a Spokane, Washington location under a fake ID. Returned to Portland International Airport on October 12th, the same day he checked into the hotel. Security footage from the rental return showed a man in a baseball cap and sunglasses. Impossible to identify. But the route made sense now. Spokane to Boise, Boise to Craters of the Moon, Craters of the Moon to Portland. A journey, a pilgrimage. Take a moment and comment below what you think those coordinates mean. And if this mystery is keeping you hooked, don't forget to subscribe. We're just getting to the most shocking part. Morrison couldn't shake the feeling that time was running backward. That somewhere in the past 35 years ago, something had happened in Coeur d'Alene that set this entire tragedy in motion. She requested archive access from the Kootenai County Sheriff's Department. Searched incident reports from December 1983. And there it was, December 18th, 1983. House fire on East Lakeshore Drive. 2 fatalities. Jennifer Hutchinson, age 21. Emily Hutchinson, age 8 months. The report was clinical, factual. Faulty space heater in the nursery. Flames spread quickly through the small wood frame house. Neighbors called 911 at 2:37 a.m. By the time firefighters arrived, the structure was fully engulfed. Mother and child died of smoke inhalation. The husband and father, David Robert Hutchinson, age 22, was not home at the time of the fire. He'd been working late at a construction site 40 minutes away. Supervisor confirmed he'd left at 2:15 a.m. Arrived home to find his house burning and his family already gone. 3 days after the funeral, David Hutchinson disappeared. Morrison read the missing person report. December 21st, 1983. David's car found abandoned at a public beach along Lake Coeur d'Alene. Wallet on the front seat. Driver's license, $47 in cash. Wedding ring placed carefully on the dashboard. A suicide note tucked under the windshield wiper, weighed down with a small rock. The note was brief, handwritten. I can't live with this. I should have been there. I should have saved them. Forgive me. Search and rescue teams combed the lake for 2 weeks, dragged the bottom, used sonar equipment. Divers explored every depth. No body was ever recovered. The case was eventually closed. Presumed drowning, presumed suicide. David Robert Hutchinson declared legally dead in 1986. But he hadn't died. Not then. Morrison stared at the black and white photo attached to the missing person report. A young man with dark hair and hopeful eyes. Barely more than a boy. She placed it next to the recent photograph from the hotel room. 35 years separated these two images. Age had added grey hair, deepened the lines around his eyes, stolen some essential light from his face. But the bone structure was the same. The shape of his jaw, the scar above his left eyebrow, visible even in the old photo. The man in room 237 was David Robert Hutchinson. Morrison made the call to Boise, Idaho, asked local authorities to locate next of kin. The name that came back was Margaret Hutchinson Cole. David's younger sister, 63 years old, still living in the same city where she'd grown up, still waiting perhaps for a brother who'd vanished on a winter night in 1983. When Morrison called her, Maggie answered on the second ring. Her voice was warm, cautious, the voice of someone who'd learned not to hope too hard for miracles. Ms. Cole, this is Detective Sarah Morrison with Portland Police Department. I'm calling about your brother, David Hutchinson. Silence on the other end. Long, heavy silence. We found him, Morrison said gently. Maggie's breath caught. Is he alive? I'm so sorry. No, but we need you to help us understand what happened. They met at a coffee shop in downtown Boise 2 days later. Maggie looked like someone who'd carried grief so long it had become part of her skeleton. Grey hair pulled back, kind eyes that had seen too much loss. She held a worn photograph of David, taken sometime in the early 80s, a young couple at a church picnic, David with his arm around a blonde woman, both smiling, a baby in a carrier between them. That's Jennifer, Maggie said, her finger tracing the woman's face. And Emily. She was 6 months old when this was taken, 2 months before they died. Morrison listened. Sometimes the best investigating is just listening. David was working construction to save money, Maggie continued. He and Jennifer had dreams. Wanted to buy a house with a yard, maybe have another baby. He was a good father, a good husband. He went to church every Sunday, coached Little League, the kind of man who stopped to help strangers change flat tires. What happened the night of the fire? Maggie's eyes went distant. He was working late. They needed to finish pouring a foundation before the weather turned. He called Jennifer around midnight, told her he loved her, told Emily good night, even though she was already asleep. That was the last time he heard their voices. He came home and found everything gone. The house was still burning. Firefighters wouldn't let him go inside. He collapsed in the yard. Neighbors had to hold him back. They said he kept screaming their names, Jennifer, Emily, over and over. Maggie wiped her eyes. At the funeral, he didn't cry. Just stood there staring at the caskets. Wouldn't speak, Wouldn't eat. I was 19. I didn't know how to help him. And then he disappeared. Maggie nodded. 3 days after we buried them, I woke up and he was gone. Found the note at the lake that afternoon. Everyone assumed he drowned himself, but I never believed it. Morrison leaned forward. Why not? Because David called me. 12 years later, summer of 1995, I was at work. Phone rang. I answered and heard his voice. Older, rougher, but his voice. He said, "Maggie, it's me. I'm okay. Don't look for me. I'm not David anymore. Let me rest. Tell everyone I'm dead." Did you try to trace the call? Of course. Police tried. It came from a payphone in Las Vegas. By the time anyone got there, he was gone. That was the last time I heard from him, 23 years ago. Maggie looked at the photo Morrison had brought, the man from the hotel. She studied it for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "That's my brother. That's David." Morrison showed her the note they'd found in his jacket, the coordinates, the date. Maggie's hand shook as she held the paper. "Those coordinates are our childhood home, where the fire happened. They tore the house down years ago. It's just an empty lot now. Someone planted a small garden there, roses. Jennifer loved roses." "Do you know why he came to Portland?" Maggie thought about it, closed her eyes. When she opened them again, tears spilled freely. Emily would have turned 35 in October 10th. Jennifer's birthday was October 13th. David died on October 13th, didn't he? Morrison checked her notes. He checked into the hotel on the 12th. We believe he died sometime during the night, early morning hours of the 13th. "He went there to die on her birthday," Maggie whispered. "After 35 years of running, he chose her birthday to finally stop." The pieces were falling into place now, but Morrison needed to understand the journey. How a 22-year-old man grieving in Coeur d'Alene became a nameless ghost dying alone in Portland, Maggie provided what little she knew. After the phone call in '95, I hired a private investigator. Cost me everything I'd saved. He found traces. David had been using fake IDs, working cash jobs, construction mostly, dishwashing, security guard positions, moving every year or two, Nevada, California, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, always drifting, always alone. Why didn't he come home? Guilt, Maggie said simply. David blamed himself for not being there, for working late, for not saving them. I tried to tell him it wasn't his fault. The fire was an accident, but he couldn't hear it, couldn't forgive himself, so he erased David Hutchinson, became nobody, because being nobody hurt less than being the man who lost everything. Morrison thought about the hotel room, the careful arrangement, the removed labels, the deliberate anonymity. He didn't want to be identified when he died. No, Maggie agreed. He wanted to disappear completely, like he'd never existed. Maybe he thought that would finally end the pain. But pain doesn't end when we erase our names. It just becomes someone else's burden to carry. If this story is touching your heart, please hit that subscribe button. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And leave a comment about forgiveness, loss, or second chances. Your words matter. The FBI managed to trace fragments of David's invisible life. Hotel registries that required ID, even fake ones. Employment records from places that paid under the table but kept minimal paperwork. DMV records from false driver's licenses used to rent apartments. The picture that emerged was haunting. For 35 years, David had lived in the margins, never staying anywhere long enough to form connections, never using his real name, never calling family. He worked hard jobs that paid in cash and asked no questions, slept in extended stay motels and boarding houses, ate at diners where nobody knew his face. Surveillance footage from a construction site in Phoenix, 2012. A man matching David's description working a jackhammer in 100-degree heat. Payroll stub from a restaurant in Albuquerque, 2014. Dishwasher, minimum wage, tips not included. A landlord in El Paso remembered renting a room to a quiet man named James Miller in 2016. Paid 6 months up front in cash. Never caused problems. Left in the middle of the night without explanation. He was running. Not from the law, not from enemies, from himself. From the unbearable weight of being David Robert Hutchinson, the man who worked late on the night his family burned. Dr. Chen's final autopsy report included one detail that broke Morrison's heart. The cause of death was officially cardiac arrest. But the specific type mattered. Stress-induced cardiomyopathy, Takotsubo syndrome, broken heart syndrome. His heart had literally broken under the weight of 3.5 decades of grief. The journey from Idaho to Portland made sense now. David had retraced parts of his wandering years. Stopped at Craters of the Moon, a place of ancient destruction and impossible beauty. A landscape that mirrored his internal desolation. Then drove to Portland, a city he'd never lived in, but had perhaps always been heading toward. A place to end the pilgrimage. A place where nobody would know his name. He'd chosen the Grand Pacific Hotel because it was old, fading, anonymous, the kind of place where people came to disappear. Room 237 was random, or maybe not. Maybe every room would have served the same purpose. A clean, quiet space to lie down and let go. Morrison wondered about his last hours. Did he feel peace? Did he think about Jennifer and Emily? Did he hope that dying would finally reunite them? The night before he died, David had gone to a small diner 3 blocks from the hotel. The waitress remembered him because he'd been so polite. Ordered coffee and apple pie. Left a $20 tip on a $7 check. Smiled at her and said, "Thank you for your kindness." Those were possibly his last words to another human being. Thank you for your kindness. He'd returned to the hotel, climbed the stairs to the 2nd floor, entered room 237, removed all identifying items from his clothing with careful, practiced precision, arranged everything neatly, put on his pajamas, set his shoes side by side, lay down in the center of the bed, and waited for his heart to stop. Sometime during the night, on October 13th, 2018, the anniversary of his wife's birthday and 35 years after her death, David's heart gave out. Stress-induced cardiomyopathy doesn't always give warning. Sometimes the heart just decides it's carried enough. Maggie claimed her brother's remains in late November. Morrison attended the small funeral in Coeur d'Alene. Fewer than 20 people came, mostly Maggie's family. A few old neighbors who remembered the young couple who died in the fire. A pastor who'd never met David but spoke about grace and mercy and the mysterious ways grief reshapes us. They buried David between Jennifer and Emily. The plot had been waiting for 35 years. Maggie had purchased it after the lake search was called off, just in case, just hoping. The headstone read, David Robert Hutchinson, 1961-2018, finally home. Morrison stood at the graveside long after everyone else had left. Maggie approached, holding a single white rose. "Thank you for bringing him back to us," Maggie said. "I'm sorry it took so long." He needed that time. 35 years of punishment for a crime he didn't commit. Maybe now he can rest. Maggie placed the rose on the fresh grave. "I forgave him the day he disappeared. I just wish he'd forgiven himself." Morrison had no answer to that. Some burdens people carry until their hearts can't bear the weight anymore. The case officially closed in December. Unidentified body identified. Mystery solved. But Morrison kept the file on her desk for weeks afterward. kept thinking about David Hutchinson, about the millions of small choices that lead us toward our endings, about the difference between disappearing and being found. The Grand Pacific Hotel still operates in Portland. Room 237 is available for booking, but housekeeping reports that some guests request a different room after checking in. They say the space feels heavy, sad, like the walls remember something the rest of us have forgotten. Betty Martinez still works there, 29 years now. She never goes into room 237 without saying a small prayer first, not because she's afraid, but because she believes every soul deserves to be acknowledged. Even the ones who spent 35 years trying to erase themselves. On quiet nights when the hotel is empty and the city sleeps, Betty sometimes pauses outside room 237, listens to the silence, and whispers, "Rest now. You're home." David Robert Hutchinson was 22 years old when he lost everything, 57 when he finally let go. In between, he lived as a ghost, haunting his own life. His story is not about how he died. It's about how grief can unmake us, how guilt can erase our names, and how sometimes the only way home is through 35 years of darkness. If someone you love is carrying unbearable weight, reach out. Tell them they're not alone. Forgiveness is possible. Healing is possible, even when the heart feels broken beyond repair. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Share it with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to come home. Drop a comment about loss, forgiveness, or the people you're still carrying in your heart. Every story matters. Every voice matters. And remember, you are more than your worst moment. You are more than your deepest regret. You are more than the weight you carry. David couldn't see that. But maybe in those final moments lying in room 237 as his heart prepared to stop, maybe he finally understood. He was going home. Thank you for watching. Until next time, take care of each other.